The twisted corpse of Emily Hale, the first human scientist to work on a secret Illyrian research station, still haunted Will Morris's mind as he downed another shot of whiskey in the seedy bar on the remote Zeta 9 space station. The Galactic Council would pay for letting the ruthless Zaxxons murder an innocent human girl. They had no idea the fury Earth would unleash. Will slammed the empty glass on the counter, his eyes scanning the dimly lit room. Smoke hung heavy in the air, mingling with the stench of cheap liquor and unwashed bodies. A figure emerged from the haze, moving with a fluid grace that set it apart from the bar's rough clientele. As it approached, Will saw it was a grey-skinned humanoid, dressed in an elegant suit that seemed out of place in the dive. The alien slid into the seat next to Will, signaling the bartender for a drink. "Mr. Morris," he said, his voice smooth and cultured. "I am Tharos, an emissary of the Illyrian race. I have a job for you." Will eyed the alien warily. "I'm listening." Tharos explained that the Zaxxons had raided the research station, not only killing Emily, but also stealing a priceless artifact of immense power. "We need you to infiltrate their base, retrieve the artifact, and destroy the facility to prevent them from reverse engineering the technology," Tharos said. "In return, we will provide you with advanced Illyrian weapons and technology that you can sell for a fortune." Will considered the offer. The money was tempting, but he didn't trust aliens. Why me? "Your skills as a former Special Forces soldier are unmatched," Tharos replied. "And there is one more thing. The Zaxxons are brutally interrogating Dr. Hale's research assistant, another human named Dr. David Reeves. He was the only survivor of the raid." Anger flared in Will's gut. "Those bastards," he growled. "I'll make them pay for what they did to Emily and for torturing another human." He stood up, his jaw set with determination. "I'm in, but if you double-cross me, I'll hunt you down and make you wish you'd never set foot on Earth." Tharos nodded solemnly. "I understand, Mr. Morris. The fate of the galaxy may depend on your success." As Will left the bar, he knew he was walking into a trap. But he didn't care. He would complete the mission, rescue Dr. Reeves, and avenge Emily's death. And if the Galactic Council tried to stop him, they would learn the hard way what happened when you cross the human race. Earth's secret fleet, hidden for decades, was ready to strike at his command. Will's heart pounded as he crept through the shadows of the Zaxxon supply ship, his stolen uniform scratchy against his skin. The advanced Illyrian plasma rifle felt heavy in his hands, but its weight was reassuring. He had already used its silenced mode to eliminate the perimeter guards with deadly precision. The cloaking device allowed him to slip past security cameras undetected. Once inside the base, Will accessed a terminal and hacked into the computer systems with ease. His fingers flew over the keys as he overrode safety protocols and triggered a reactor overload. Alarms blared, and Zaxxons ran in panic as Will raced towards the detention block, guided by the base schematics he had downloaded. Smoke filled the corridors as Will reached the cell where Emily was held. He blasted the lock and kicked open the door, revealing her unconscious form crumpled on the floor, covered in bruises and dried blood. Anger surged through him at the sight of her injuries. He scooped her up gently and made his way to the shuttle bay, shooting any Zaxxons who dared to stand in his way. Will commandeered a shuttle and laid Emily on a bench in the back. As he launched the craft, a massive explosion rocked the base behind them. He pushed the engines to full throttle, barely outrunning the shockwave. In the shuttle's small medbay, Will tended to Emily's wounds as best he could with the limited supplies. She remained unconscious, her face pale and breathing shallow. As he worked, Will was surprised by the tenderness he felt towards her. This mission was no longer just about the money or revenge. He found himself genuinely concerned for her well-being. Suddenly the comm system crackled to life. "Mr. Morris," came Tharos's smooth voice, "I see you have Dr. Hale. Excellent work. Now bring her to the coordinates I'm sending you. The Illyrian homeworld awaits." Will's jaw clenched. "You lied to me, Tharos. There was no artifact. This was about Emily the whole time. Her knowledge, her skills, that's what you wanted." "Very astute, Mr. Morris. But it changes nothing. Bring her to us and you will be well compensated." "Go to hell," Will spat. "I'm not handing her over to you or anyone else." He cut the link and checked the navigation system, intending to set a course for the nearest friendly outpost. But before he could engage the hyperdrive, the shuttle shuddered as a blast struck its shields. A Zaxxon warship loomed on the sensors, its weapons charging for another volley. Will cursed and wrenched the controls, trying to evade the incoming fire. The shuttle was no match for a warship. Alarms screeched as the shields failed and the hull ruptured, venting atmosphere into space. Will fought to keep the crippled craft steady as he searched for a place to set down. A barren moon appeared in the viewport, and he aimed the shuttle towards it, praying they would survive the landing. The impact was jarring, throwing Will from his seat. He blacked out for a moment, and when he came to, the shuttle was dark and still. Emergency lighting flickered weakly, illuminating the wreckage of the cabin. Will stumbled to the medbay, relieved to find Emily still breathing. He checked the shuttle's systems and swore under his breath. The cloaking device was fried, the rescue beacon non-functional. They were stranded on this lifeless rock, with only a basic survival kit and failing life support, and the Zaxxons would be coming for them. As he assessed their bleak situation, Will noticed something on the back of Emily's neck. Strange blue symbols like a tattoo. With a shock, he recognized it as an ID code used by a top-secret Earth military project. Atlas. He had heard whispers about it during his time in Special Forces, but nothing concrete. Will's mind raced as he applied fresh dressings to Emily's wounds. Whatever Atlas was, it had to be important. Important enough for the Zaxxons to torture her, for the Illyrians to want her. And now it was up to him to keep her safe, no matter the cost. He glanced at the shuttle's scanners and grimaced. Zaxxon ships were already sweeping the moon, searching for them. Will grabbed his weapons and survival gear, then lifted Emily into his arms. He would find them shelter, keep them hidden, buy time for her to recover, for him to figure out their next move. As he stepped out into the bleak alien landscape, Will knew the odds were against them, but he was a survivor, a fighter, and he had something worth fighting for now. He would protect Emily, uncover the secrets of Atlas, and make whoever was responsible for all this pay. The Zaxxons, the Illyrians, even the damned Galactic Council, they had no idea what they had unleashed when they chose to cross the human race. Will's lungs burned as he sprinted across the barren landscape. Emily's limp form clutched tightly against his chest. The twisted metal of the wrecked shuttle receded behind him as he made for a jagged outcropping of rock in the distance, praying it would conceal some kind of shelter. Sweat poured down his face inside the confines of his helmet as he pushed himself harder, legs pumping, boots pounding against the rocky ground. The weight of Emily and his gear dragged at him, but he refused to slow down. The whine of approaching ships reached his ears, just as he skidded into the shadow of the outcropping. Heart jackhammering, Will scanned the cliff face and sagged in relief as he spotted a gaping crack in the stone. He squeezed himself and Emily through the narrow opening, finding himself in a small, dim cavern. Will laid Emily down gently on the smoothest patch of ground he could find and crouched beside her, checking her pulse with shaking fingers. It was thready, but there. "Stay with me, Em," he murmured, activating the emergency beacon on her suit. The device chirped and a small green light winked on, signaling it was transmitting. Will risked a glance outside and swore under his breath. Zaxxon ships were descending from the sky like a swarm of angry insects, fanning out over the area. It wouldn't take them long to find the wrecked shuttle. He needed to hide it, buy them some time. Leaving Emily hidden in the depths of the cave, Will raced back to the crash site, mind whirring. He tore branches from the scrubby trees dotting the landscape and gathered armfuls of loose stone and dirt. Working frantically, he scattered the debris over the shuttle until it blended into the rocky terrain, indistinguishable from the surrounding landscape unless you knew exactly where to look. A groan from the cave sent him sprinting back to Emily's side. Her eyelids fluttered open, and she stared at him, eyes glassy and unfocused. "Will," she croaked, voice raspy, where are we?" "Shh, don't try to talk," Will soothed, checking her wounds. "We crashed on some moon. The Zaxxons are looking for us, but I'm going to get us out of here, I promise." Emily's hand shot out and gripped his arm with surprising strength. "The key," she gasped out, face contorting in pain. They can't get the key. Convergence. It's coming. Dread crawled down Will's spine at her words, but before he could question her further, the sound of ships landing nearby echoed through the cavern. He cursed and reached for his rifle, positioning himself at the cave mouth. Through the scope, he watched as squads of Zaxxon soldiers emerged from the ships, fanning out in a standard search pattern. Will drew in a deep breath, letting it out slowly as he centered the crosshairs on the lead soldier's head. The rifle kicked against his shoulder, and the Zaxxon dropped, purple blood spraying from the neat hole in his skull. Will fired again and again, each shot finding its mark, littering the ground with crumpled bodies. But more soldiers kept coming, an endless tide of them. Will's rifle beeped a warning as the power cell ran low, and he flinched as a plasma bolt struck the rock near his head, showering him with molten fragments. He ducked back into the cave, heart pounding. They were out of time. The Zaxxons would be on top of them any second. Will gripped his rifle and prepared to make his final stand. He would go down fighting, take as many of the bastards with him as he could. Suddenly, the world outside the cave erupted in blinding blue light. Will squinted against the glare, barely able to make out the Zaxxon ships as they disintegrated under a barrage of searing energy beams. The beams sliced through the alien craft like a hot knife through butter, leaving nothing but drifting ash in their wake. The shooting stopped as abruptly as it had begun. Blinking away the after-images seared into his retinas, Will stared in awe as a fleet of human warships flickered into view, shimmering into existence as their cloaking devices disengaged. Before he could react, armed figures materialized inside the cave in a crackle of displaced air. Will raised his rifle instinctively, but lowered it as he took in the soldiers' distinctly human features beneath their high-tech helmets. The lead soldier stepped forward, the name Reeves emblazoned on his chest plate. He retracted his helmet, revealing a rugged, battle-worn face. "Captain Aidan Reeves, Cerberus Squad," the man said brusquely. "You're safe now, Mr. Morris. We'll take it from here." Will's head spun as Reeves explained the situation in clipped tones. Emily's research was the key to everything. The Illyrians had hired the Zaxxons to capture her, to prevent her work from coming to fruition. Cerberus had been watching, biding their time until the moment was right to extract her. Reeves offered Will a deal: escort Emily back to a secure Cerberus facility, and he would be rewarded handsomely. Will barely heard the staggering figure Reeves quoted, his attention focused solely on Emily's pale, still face. He nodded jerkily, accepting the offer without hesitation. Cerberus medics swarmed forward, transferring Emily to a hover stretcher and whisking her away in a flurry of activity. The next few hours passed in a blur as Will was hustled aboard a Cerberus warship. The cloaking device engaged, and the ship leapt into warp, stars blurring into streaks of light outside the viewports. Will paced outside the sickbay, exhaustion dragging at his limbs, but unable to rest until he knew Emily would be all right. When the doctors finally let him in to see her, he almost wept in relief. She was still pale, but the lines of pain had eased from her face, and her breathing was deep and even. He sank into a chair at her bedside, clasping her limp hand in his. Reeves joined him after a time, his face grave. "The Illyrians aren't going to stop," the captain said quietly. "And now that the Zaxxons have failed, others will come for her. This is bigger than all of us, Morris. What she's found, it could change everything, for better or worse." Will tightened his grip on Emily's hand, jaw clenching. "What do you mean? What exactly has she found?" Reeves met his gaze, eyes hard. Ancient artifacts scattered across the galaxy, fragments of a long-dead civilization that once wielded power beyond imagining, and if the whispers are true, the key to unlocking that power. A chill skittered down Will's spine at the captain's words. Emily murmured restlessly in her sleep, fingers twitching in his grasp. "The convergence," she mumbled, brow furrowing. "It's coming, can't let them find the key." Will leaned closer, heart pounding. "Em, what do you mean? What's the key? What's coming?" But Emily just shook her head weakly, slipping back into unconsciousness. Will slumped back in his chair, mind racing. Whatever secrets Emily had uncovered, they were worth killing for. And now he was a part of this too, whether he liked it or not. He had sworn to protect her, and he would. No matter what horrors the galaxy threw at them, he would keep Emily safe, even if it meant facing down the entirety of the Illyrian Empire itself. The Zaxxons had been just the beginning, Will realized grimly, a shadow of what was to come, but the galaxy would soon learn the folly of underestimating the human race. For when pushed to the brink, humanity always found a way to push back even harder, and now they had a secret weapon, the power of the ancients, just waiting to be unlocked. Will just prayed that when the dust settled and the key was found, that power would wind up in the right hands. The fate of the galaxy itself might depend on it. Will stared up at the domed ceiling of the underwater Cerberus base as the tram carried him and Emily deeper into the sprawling complex. Schools of alien fish swam past the transparent walls of the transit tube, their bioluminescent scales casting an eerie blue glow. Emily, now fully recovered from her injuries, sat beside him, her eyes alight with an excitement he hadn't seen before. "I need to show you something," she said, leading him into her lab once they disembarked. The room was a mess of holographic displays and strange devices, but Emily moved through the chaos with purpose, pulling up a series of glowing glyphs on the main screen. "This is the language of the progenitors," she explained, "an ancient race that vanished millennia ago. But before they disappeared, they left behind a network of artifacts called Nexus keys scattered across the galaxy." Will studied the alien symbols, a sense of unease growing in his gut. What do these keys do? Emily's face was grave. When activated together, they form an energy grid capable of reshaping reality itself, and the Illyrians, led by Tharos, are determined to acquire them all. She brought up a schematic of a device, intricate and pulsing with energy. "This is my breakthrough, a way to locate and unlock the true power of the keys, keeping them out of the wrong hands." Will met her gaze, seeing the determination burning there. He thought of all the lives lost, all the destruction wrought by this secret war, and he knew he couldn't walk away. "I'm in," he said firmly. "We can't let Tharos succeed. I'll help you recover the keys." Emily smiled, but it was Captain Reeves who spoke from the doorway. "I'm not convinced we can trust you, Morris." His eyes were hard, calculating. "How do we know this isn't some ploy by the Illyrians?" Will bristled, but Emily cut in. "I vouch for him, Captain. Will risked everything to save my life. He's one of us now." Reeves held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded curtly. "Fine, but he's your responsibility, Doctor." As Reeves stalked away, Emily turned to Will with a wry smile. "Looks like it's just you and me against the galaxy." Will felt a rush of something he couldn't quite name. Wouldn't have it any other way. Over the next weeks, Will and Emily embarked on a series of covert missions to track down the Nexus keys. They infiltrated ancient temples on jungle moons, delved into long-buried ruins on desert planets, and haggled with black market dealers in seedy space station bazaars. At every turn they faced danger and adversity, hostile native species, intent on guarding their secrets, treacherous environments, from toxic atmospheres to raging electrical storms, and always the looming threat of Illyrian interference. But through it all, Will and Emily grew closer, forging a bond born of shared purpose and sacrifice. Will taught her to shoot, to fight hand to hand. Emily showed him how to navigate using the stars, to read the ancient progenitor glyphs. They saved each other's lives more times than Will could count. Once, on a windswept asteroid, they huddled together for warmth in a makeshift shelter as a meteor storm raged outside. Emily dozed against Will's shoulder, her hair tickling his cheek, and Will realized that somewhere along the way, his feelings for her had deepened into something more than mere camaraderie. But there was no time to explore those feelings, not with the fate of the galaxy at stake. They pushed onward, driven by the knowledge that every key they found brought them one step closer to thwarting Tharos's plans. Until the day it all went wrong. They were on a frozen moon, tracking a faint energy signature deep beneath the ice. Will took point as they descended into a labyrinth of tunnels, Emily close behind. The passageways narrowed and the walls turned slick with condensation. Suddenly a laser blast seared past Will's head, missing him by inches. He spun, rifle at the ready, to see a squad of heavily armed Illyrians emerging from the shadows. "It's a trap," Emily shouted, diving for cover as more shots filled the air. Will recognized the sleek armor and coiled grace of Tharos's elite operatives, the Silent Blades. He and Emily fought side by side, energy bolts ricocheting off the icy walls. But the blades were too many, too fast, and when a searing pain exploded in Will's chest, he knew he'd been hit. He stumbled, his rifle clattering to the ground. Emily screamed his name, rushing to his side as the blades closed in. She dragged him behind a frozen stalagmite, desperation etched on her face. "Hold on, Will," she pleaded, pressing her hands against the wound in his chest. "Don't you dare die on me." Will coughed, tasting blood. You have to go. Get the key." But she shook her head fiercely, tears in her eyes. "Not without you." With their last strength, they managed to collapse the tunnel behind them, burying the blades in a ton of ice and rubble. Emily half-carried, half-dragged Will back to their ship, his blood staining the snow crimson. As she tended to his wounds, her hands gentle on his skin, Will saw the depth of her feelings for him shining in her eyes, and despite the pain, he smiled. They had all the keys now save one final piece to the puzzle that could save the galaxy, or damn it. On a dying world circling a collapsing star, they followed the locator signal to the last Nexus key. A great stone temple rose from the cracked earth, silhouetted against the bloody sky. Will and Emily fought their way through squads of Illyrian troopers, the ground shaking beneath their feet as the planet tore itself apart. In the heart of the temple, they found the key, floating above an altar, pulsing with eldritch light. But before they could claim it, a cold voice cut through the air. "I'm afraid I can't let you take that." Tharos emerged from the shadows, flanked by a dozen silent blades. Gone was the smooth politician's mask. His face was twisted with hunger, with the naked lust for power. "The Nexus grid was never meant for human hands," he sneered. "With it, the Illyrian Empire will ascend to heights undreamed of, and all who stand in our way will burn." Emily's eyes flashed with defiance. "We won't let you enslave the galaxy. The keys are meant to protect, not destroy." Tharos laughed, a cruel hollow sound. "You naive child. The progenitors built the keys as weapons, as tools of conquest, and I will fulfill their glorious purpose." He raised his hand and the silent blades surged forward. Will and Emily fought back to back, energy blasts sizzling the air around them. The temple shook and bucked as the planet's core destabilized, great cracks splitting the stone floor. In the chaos, Tharos lunged for the Nexus key. But Emily was faster, snatching it from the altar an instant before his grasping fingers could close around it. Tharos howled with rage, lashing out with a blast of psychic force that sent Emily flying. She hit the wall with a sickening crunch and crumpled to the ground, the key tumbling from her grasp. Will bellowed her name, heedless of the laser bolt scorching past him. He charged at Tharos, all thoughts of his own safety forgotten. They grappled hand to hand, Will's raw fury matched against Tharos's inhuman strength. With a final desperate effort, Will managed to hurl Tharos back against the altar. The Illyrian's skull cracked against the stone with a wet thud, and he collapsed in a twitching heap. Will staggered to Emily's side, gathering her limp form into his arms. Please," he begged, cradling her face in his hands. "Don't leave me." Her eyelids fluttered open, her gaze unfocused. "Will, the key." He glanced to where it lay, just out of reach. An energy blast had melted the casing, damaging the delicate circuitry within. Tharos stirred, his eyes glinting with malice as he began to drag himself upright. In that moment, Will understood what he had to do. He looked down at Emily, his heart breaking. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and he kissed her, pouring all his love, all his devotion into that fleeting touch. Then he surged to his feet, snatching up the key and charging at Tharos with a wordless cry. The Illyrian raised his hand, a ball of crackling energy coalescing in his palm. Will slammed into him, knocking him back into the altar with a bone-shattering crunch. The energy blast went wild, searing a hole through the temple wall and revealing a dizzying drop into the molten heart of the dying planet. Locked together, Will and Tharos teetered on the edge of oblivion. With the last of his strength, Will wrenched the key from Tharos's grasp and shoved him backwards into the abyss. Tharos's scream echoed in Will's ears as he watched the Illyrian vanish into the flames. Then the ground heaved beneath him, and he lost his balance, the key flying from his grasp as he began to fall. A hand caught his wrist, yanking him back from the brink. Emily, her face pale but determined, hauled him away from the edge. Behind them, the key tumbled into the depths, consumed by the planet's fiery death throes. They ran, dodging geysers of magma and collapsing stone. Emily's hand clutched tightly in Will's. The temple crumbled around them as they threw themselves into their waiting ship, engaging the thrusters even as the hatch slammed shut. The shockwave from the planet's final destruction buffeted the ship as they tore free of the atmosphere. The viewport filled with searing light. But they were alive, battered and bloodied, but alive. In the silence that followed, Emily turned to Will, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You did it," she whispered. "You saved the galaxy." Will shook his head, pulling her close. "We did it together." He kissed her then, long and deep, as the stars wheeled around them. For now in this moment there was no war, no impending doom. There was only the two of them, and the love they had forged through fire and blood and sacrifice. But the battle was far from over. Tharos was dead, but the Illyrian Empire remained, and they would not take the loss of their leader lightly. Emily met Will's gaze, her jaw set with determination. "We have to stop them, Will, once and for all, or everything we've fought for will be for nothing." Will nodded grimly, his hand finding hers. "Then that's what we'll do, together." They turned back to the controls, setting a course for the heart of Illyrian space. The final confrontation awaited, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. But for the first time, Will dared to hope. With Emily by his side, he felt like they could face anything the universe could throw at them, and together they would light the stars with the fire of human defiance, the fury of a species pushed to the brink, and emerging stronger than ever. The Illyrians had no idea what was coming for them, but they were about to find out, in the most devastating way possible, just what happened when you underestimated the tenacity of the human spirit. For this was not the end. It was only the beginning, and the galaxy would tremble before the storm that Will and Emily were about to unleash. The Cerberus ships emerged from the quantum vortex, the Illyrian homeworld looming before them like a malevolent eye. Will stood beside Captain Reeves on the bridge of the flagship, his heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. "All ships engage cloaking devices," Reeves ordered. "Prepare for orbital bombardment." The human fleet shimmered and vanished from sight, the advanced stealth technology rendering them invisible to Illyrian sensors. They slipped past the outer defenses, closing in on the planet's surface. "Fire at will," Reeves commanded. A barrage of plasma torpedoes and graviton bombs erupted from the unseen ships, slamming into the Illyrian defense platforms and shattering them like glass. The Illyrians, caught completely off guard, scrambled to mount a counterattack, but it was too late. "We've opened a hole in their defenses," Emily reported from her console, her eyes locked on the tactical display. "Will, your team needs to move now." Will nodded, his jaw set with determination. He turned to the strike team assembled behind him, each soldier clad in advanced Cerberus battle armor. "You know the plan," he said, his voice steady. "We get in, we find Tharos, and we stop him from activating the Nexus Key network, no matter the cost." The soldiers nodded grimly, readying their weapons. Will led them to the hangar bay where a cloaked dropship awaited. As they boarded, Emily caught Will's hand, pulling him close. "Be careful," she whispered, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Will squeezed her hand, trying to ignore the icy fear in his gut. "I will, I promise." The dropship launched, streaking towards the planet's surface under the cover of the ongoing orbital bombardment. It touched down on the outskirts of Tharos's fortress, a towering spire of black metal and pulsing energy shields. Will and his team moved out, their cloaking devices rendering them nearly invisible as they approached the fortress walls. Illyrian soldiers patrolled the perimeter, their weapons at the ready. Will signaled to his team, and as one they opened fire. Plasma bolts and laser blasts tore through the Illyrian ranks, dropping them before they could even cry out. The humans advanced, leapfrogging from cover to cover, relentlessly pushing towards the fortress gates. But as they reached the entrance, a shimmering wall of energy sprang up before them. Will cursed, recognizing the telltale signature of a silent blade stealth field. The elite Illyrian warriors materialized out of thin air, their monomolecular blades flashing as they charged the human strike team. Will met them head-on, his plasma rifle spitting blue fire. He dodged and weaved, the world slowing down around him as his enhanced reflexes kicked in. His team fought beside him, their weapons and armor more than a match for the silent blade's stealth and speed. But the Illyrians kept coming, wave after wave of them pouring out of the fortress. Will's team was forced to fall back, taking cover behind the twisted remains of Illyrian hover tanks. "Family," Will shouted into his comlink, ducking as a plasma bolt sizzled over his head. "We're pinned down, we need an opening." "Working on it," came Emily's tense reply. "I'm hacking into their defense grid now, just hold on a little longer." Will gritted his teeth, popping up to snap off a few more shots at the advancing silent blades. Suddenly, the energy shield surrounding the fortress flickered and died, the Illyrian weapons falling silent. "Goat," Emily yelled. "I've disabled their defenses, but it won't last long." Will surged to his feet, leading the charge towards the fortress gates. They blasted through the weakened doors, emerging into a cavernous hall lined with pulsing conduits and humming power relays. "Tharos is in the central chamber," Emily said over the comm. "Hurry, Will, I'm reading a massive energy build-up. He's preparing to activate the Nexus keys." Will sprinted down the corridor, his team close behind. They encountered pockets of resistance along the way, Illyrian soldiers and silent blades emerging from hidden alcoves and side passages, but the humans fought through them, leaving a trail of shattered bodies in their wake. At last they reached the central chamber. The doors swung open, revealing Tharos standing before a towering machine, the Nexus keys orbiting him in a swirling vortex of light. The Illyrian leader turned as Will and his team entered, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "You're too late, human," Tharos sneered. "The Nexus grid is nearly complete. When I join the final key, the power of the progenitors will be mine to command, and your pathetic species will be the first to feel my wrath." Will raised his rifle, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Not if I have anything to say about it." Tharos laughed, a cold, hollow sound. He raised his hand, and a shimmering field of energy sprang up around him, deflecting Will's shots. The Illyrian leader plucked a glowing orb from his belt, the light pulsing in time with the orbiting keys. "Behold the power of the Illyrian Empire," Tharos roared, his voice echoing through the chamber. He hurled the orb at Will, a blinding beam of energy erupting from its core. Will dove aside, feeling the searing heat of the beam as it scorched the floor where he had been standing. His team opened fire, but their shots dissipated harmlessly against Tharos's energy shield. The Illyrian leader laughed, firing off more blasts from the orb, driving the humans back. "Will," Emily's voice crackled over the comm. "I'm in the fortress mainframe. I'm trying to disrupt the Nexus key activation sequence, but I need more time." Will gritted his teeth, rolling behind a support pillar as another energy blast tore through the air. "Do what you can, Em. We'll keep Tharos busy." He popped out of cover, firing off a rapid burst at Tharos's head. The Illyrian leader deflected the shots with contemptuous ease, retaliating with a searing beam that forced Will to duck back behind the pillar. "Pathetic," Tharos sneered. "Is this the best the vaunted human resistance has to offer?" Will's jaw clenched, anger surging through him. He looked around, desperately searching for a weakness in Tharos's defenses. His gaze fell on the pulsing conduits lining the walls, and a plan began to form in his mind. "Emily," he said into the calm, keeping his voice low, "can you overload the power relays in here? I need a distraction." "I'll try," Emily replied, her voice strained. "But Will, if I do that, it could destabilize the entire fortress. You need to get out of there." "I'm not leaving without you," Will said firmly. "Just do it." There was a moment of silence. Then Emily's voice came back, tight with fear and determination. "All right, overloading power relays, now." The conduits lining the walls suddenly flared with blinding light, tendrils of energy arcing out to strike the floor and ceiling. Tharos staggered back, his energy shield flickering as the overload washed over him. Will seized his chance. He lunged out from behind the pillar, firing a sustained burst at Tharos's chest. The Illyrian leader stumbled, his shield failing under the onslaught. Will closed the distance, ramming his rifle butt into Tharos's face. Tharos reeled back, dark blood streaming from his shattered nose. But he lashed out with the energy orb, catching Will in the chest and sending him flying across the room. Will slammed into the wall, the breath driven from his lungs. He struggled to rise, his vision swimming. Through the haze of pain, he saw Tharos advancing on him, the orb glowing brighter than ever. "And so it ends," Tharos snarled, his face a mask of blood and rage. "The last futile gasp of a doomed species. Know that your death will herald the dawn of a new age, the age of Illyrian rule." He raised the orb, the light building to a blinding crescendo. Will braced himself, knowing he could not dodge this final, lethal blast. Suddenly, a slender figure darted out from behind a nearby console, something clutched in her hand. Emily, her face set with grim determination, lunged at Tharos, thrusting the object against his energy shield. There was a blinding flash, and Tharos screamed. His shield shattered like glass, the shockwave hurling him back against the Nexus key machine. Emily stood over him, the object in her hand now revealed as some kind of improvised pulse grenade. "Looks like your shiny new toy has a few glitches," she said coldly. "Oops." Will struggled to his feet, staring at Emily in awe and disbelief. She met his gaze, a small smile tugging at her lips. But the moment was shattered by a blood-curdling roar. Tharos, his armor smoking and his flesh seared, lunged at Emily, murder in his eyes. Will leapt forward, bringing his rifle to bear. But he was too slow. Tharos closed his hand around Emily's throat, lifting her off her feet. She choked and gasped, scrabbling at his fingers. "You cannot stop the inevitable," Tharos growled, his voice thick with pain and rage. "The Nexus grid will be mine." With his free hand, he input a final command into the Nexus key machine. The device hummed to life, the keys spinning faster and faster above it. Emily's eyes widened in horror. "Will," she croaked out. "He's activated a dead man's switch, the Nexus grid. It's going to overload." Will fired, his shots tearing into Tharos's back. The Illyrian leader stiffened, then crumpled, his grip on Emily slackening. She fell to the floor, gasping for breath. Will rushed to the control panel, his heart in his throat. The readout scrolled past in a blur of alien script, but the rising wail of the overloading machine told him all he needed to know. "Emily," he said urgently, "the overload is building too fast. It's going to rip apart the fabric of space-time. We have to shut it down." Emily pulled herself upright, her face pale but determined. "I can't stop it," she said hoarsely, "but maybe I can contain it." She staggered to the machine, pulling components from her belt and slotting them into place with shaking hands. Will watched her work, a growing sense of dread settling in his gut. "What are you doing?" he asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. Emily looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'm modifying the pulse grenade," she said softly, "turning it into a quantum field disruptor. If I can get it inside the Nexus grid's containment field, it should absorb the excess energy from the overload, prevent it from tearing apart the galaxy." Will's heart clenched. "But the feedback from that much energy, it'll kill you." She smiled sadly. "I know." "No," Will said fiercely, grabbing her hand. There has to be another way. We'll find a way to shut it down together. Emily shook her head. There's no time, Will. If we don't act now, trillions will die. Entire star systems snuffed out in an instant. I can't let that happen. I won't. Tears streamed down her face as she cupped Will's cheek with her free hand. I love you, Will Morris, she whispered. I always have. From the moment you rescued me from that Zaxxon base, I knew my heart would be yours forever. She leaned in, pressing her lips to his in a fierce, desperate kiss. Will held her close, pouring all his love, all his anguish into that final embrace. Emily pulled away, her eyes shining with a fierce, unyielding light. Promise me, she said, her voice steady despite the tears. Promise me you'll keep fighting, that you'll lead our people to victory. Build a better future, a future where no species can threaten us again. Will swallowed hard, his heart breaking. I promise. Emily smiled, a fragile, beautiful thing. Then, before he could stop her, she turned and leapt into the seething maelstrom of the overloading Nexus grid, the quantum disruptor clutched to her chest. Emily! Will screamed, lunging after her. But it was too late. The disruptor detonated, a blinding flash of light consuming Emily's form. The Nexus grid containment field flared, pulsing with a searing radiance that forced Will to shield his eyes. When the glare faded, the machine was dark and still. The Nexus keys lay scattered on the floor, drained of their power. And Emily. Emily was gone. Will sank to his knees, a wordless cry of anguish tearing from his throat. His team gathered around him, their faces etched with sorrow and grim resolve. Sir, one of them said quietly, the Illyrian defenses are in disarray. Their ships are breaking formation. If we're going to extract, it has to be now. Will forced himself to stand, his grief hardening into a cold, implacable fury. Sound the retreat, he said, his voice like iron. We're done here. As the dropship carried them away from the shattered ruins of Tharas's fortress, Will stared out the viewport at the burning wreckage of the Illyrian fleet. The sight brought him no satisfaction, no sense of victory. All he could see was Emily's face, her brave, beautiful smile in those final moments. The sacrifice she had made for him, for all of them. In the days that followed, as the Galactic Council convened to discuss the new balance of power, Will found himself thrust into a leadership role he had never sought. The surviving Cerberus commanders looked to him for guidance, the freed races of the galaxy hailing him as a savior. But when the Council offered humanity a seat at the table, a chance to join the galactic community as equals, Will turned them down. Humanity will forge its own path, he told the assembled delegates, his voice hard and unyielding. We will protect our own interests on our own terms. Never again will we be at the mercy of alien agendas. As he spoke, he thought of Emily, of the dream they had shared, a galaxy where humanity was strong, where no outside force could threaten or control them. He would make that dream a reality, no matter the cost. In the years that followed, Cerberus grew and expanded, its influence spreading to every corner of human space. Will led them forward, driven by the memory of Emily's sacrifice and the knowledge that he carried in his heart. The knowledge of the progenitors, the secrets of their technology that Emily had uncovered. With that knowledge, with the might of Cerberus at his command, Will would reshape the galaxy. He would build a future where humanity reigned supreme, where no alien power could challenge their dominion. A future bought with blood and sacrifice, but one that would endure for generations. As the Cerberus fleet disappeared into the depths of space, the stars themselves seemed to whisper with the echoes of Emily's final words. Promise me you'll keep fighting, that you'll lead our people to victory, build a better future, a future where no species can threaten us again. A promise Will intended to keep, no matter the cost. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.